Welcome to the Long Range Pursuit Podcast, presented by Gunworks, where we learn about and share long-range shooting techniques, science, and gear.
Welcome back to the podcast. This is Brian Poor from Long Range University, and today we got Tom Schneider with Stuck in the Rut here with us. And welcome, Tom.
Hey, thank you for having me.
You know, and for those of you that aren't familiar with Stuck in the Rut, you know, I've known these guys and girl for a few years now. And, you know, when it comes to like just that hardcore blue collar, they're all working folks, you know, 365 days a year, either scouting or hunting, you know, somewhere in the West or up in Alaska. You know, these guys are the real deal. So, you know, really excited to talk to Tom. You know, he's got just a tremendous amount of hunting experience. So, you know, with that, you know, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself and Stuck in the Rut and who you guys are and what you do. I'd love to hear a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, Tom Schneider here with Stuck in the Rut. It actually originally started with my brother Travis. You know, we grew up in I would say somewhat spoiled in the sense that not with money, but with knowledge. My dad has been hunting elk since the 1980s. And, you know, so I would say even before that, but I'd say he got an archery hunt in the 1980s and really got obsessed with elk hunting. And, you know, he was originally a Montana resident, met my mom in Idaho, and then they moved here in Idaho and had us kids. And we got thrown right into hunting, right? So it's like, you know, it was a good thing, but we obviously didn't have a choice. It's like we got right into hunting at a very early age. Shed hunting before I was even of age to hunt. So it's like, okay, well, but I was anticipating the time that I got to age to hunt because I saw my dad's antler pile. I saw the big bulls he was killing every year. So I really idolized that and I wanted to be just like my dad, right? And yeah. I think every little kid does. And it got to the point where I got to the right age. I was 12 years old at the time, and my dad, you know, took us in the backcountry and bugle an elk, and it was just so cool. And I consider this, I'm not an old guy, but I consider these the good old days where there was a lot of elk in the mountains, no wolves at the time. And it was just really plentiful. And if one elk didn't work out, we go after another. And just getting into all that action and stuff, I was addicted right from the get-go. I killed, actually, believe it or not, my first elk when I was 12 years old. Ended up being a cow elk, but after that, when I was 13, that's when I killed my first bull elk, and it was a 6-point 6x5. And since then, on and off, I've killed multiple bull elk. The other day, I actually kind of just did a count. I'm not a numbers guy myself, but I'm like, well, let's see how many elk I've killed over the years. And so I grabbed the ivory. I have a pile of ivories in a jar, took them out, and I paired up 23. So I've killed 23 bull elk over the years. So, and a lot of really nice ones too. So, and then my brother Travis, I asked him the other day, I was like, well, how many? And so he did a count. He counted 25. And, you know, so I'm thinking like between myself, Travis, Trevor, my sister Tana, my mom and dad, we've killed over 100 elk. I've packed out a lot of quarters. So we've had our fair share of elk experience.
That's a lot of collective knowledge and experience there for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, so we got in the Stuck in the Rut. It was kind of like later in our high school era where, you know, we were really hardcore hunters, and we already got the reputation, at least in our town, right? Like, so everybody knew the Schneiders were big hunters and they got after it. And we were pulling big stuff off the mountain. And I got that reputation even as a high schooler. We were having adults, like, they'd freak out when one of us high schoolers would be in there because they knew how hard we hunted. So it's like, oh shoot, one of the Schneider boys is in my hunting spot. We're screwed. You know what I mean? Like, people were almost intimidated by us. And it was funny to think back, like we had 30, 40-year-old guys intimidated by us high school kids just because they knew we got after it, you know? And, but that's kind of why we always wanted to start Stuck in the Rut was, you know, we wanted to capture our experiences on video. We saw other hunters and, you know, like, and this is back before social media, before YouTube. So everything was on the Sportsman channel, the Outdoor channel, and, you know, watching Jim Shockey and some of these other really cool hunters, we kind of idolized that, and we wanted to capture our experiences on video. And so, and I'm not trying to bash any type of hunting at all when I'm saying this, but when we saw like people that would give themselves the title of a professional hunter and they would do these ranch hunts and stuff, it was just like, yeah, that's just not our cup of tea. We kind of want to bring, like you said, kind of a blue collar idea into the mix. And so for people that other people can relate to us, it got to a point where I felt like we weren't really relating to what we were seeing on the Sportsman channel and the Outdoor channel anymore too. But like I said, I'm not dissing that, because if you have the money to do like a hunt on the res, I think go do it, like go do these hunts that you want to do. Like, there's nothing against that. It's just for us, we couldn't relate to that because it's just not in our budget to do those type of hunts. And so we wanted to show people like what it's like to hunt public land, DIY, and what better place to do it than, this is about around the time we started doing this was around the same time YouTube came out. Okay. And so that's when we jumped right into YouTube. And I actually had some disagreements with my brother there because Travis was still back in the old era of let's print DVDs and let's put it on the Sportsman channel. And I'm like, for me, I already saw the future, right? And no one was doing hunting videos at the time. Well, no, I'm going to say no one was. There was a couple guys that were doing it. But it was just like, we got the forefront of it, or like we started doing it at a very right from the get-go. And that was probably one of the best decisions we made, and getting our name out there was starting YouTube and getting the traction, because that's where, we were known, like if people watch YouTube hunting videos, it was Stuck in the Rut. That was like the number one. Now there's a lot of other really good channels that have started since then and that have grown tremendously. But like I said, we're just glad we got the forefront, because that kind of helped us gain kind of our reputation that we have now.
Yeah. I've watched you guys for quite a few years, before I came to Gunworks, and I always related with that kind of that blue collar side of it, because, I get so much more satisfaction about going out there and doing it myself, and traveling to a Western state, and just figuring it out when I get there, and I just love doing that. And before I moved to Cody, that was like my once a year trip was to go to some Western state, with my bow or a rifle and just figure it out, someplace I'd never been before, so videos like that always kind of inspired me, just through that lots of hard work, you can get it done, and the other thing that really always grabbed me too is like, there's a lot of people out there that film a lot of elk and mule deer hunts, but, and this is a little outside of the elk hunting, but like you're wolf hunting, I don't think there's anybody out there killing as many wolves as you guys are, so it's just that 365 days a year lifestyle side of it is kind of what really, I gravitated towards.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And, and I won't get too much into wolves, but kind of one of the reasons why I got into wolf hunting so bad was just my irritation, what I was seeing them do to my elk areas. Right. Yeah. Some guys, I got the reputation of being a wolf hunter, but what I've really told people is this: I'm a pissed off elk hunter. I'm just like, that's really what got me into wolf hunting. Is just, and I think any really skilled wolf hunter and trapper that I know right now, they have like a strong passion of some sort. The best trapper, and I'm telling you, when I'm saying the best trapper, he's got the highest count in trapping in Idaho than any other person. Like he's number one. And he was a moose hunter in Idaho. So even though he wasn't the one drawing tags, if somebody drew a moose tag, I won't give his name because he kind of likes to be, not, he doesn't like to be in the spotlight, but he was a moose hunter big time. Like he loved to go in these moose hunts and help people out. He just enjoyed the experience of getting out there and hunting these Shiras moose, and he pulled some quality moose. And even my mom, she killed a monster bull moose when she drew the tag, and he came with us and helped her with that big bull. She killed a big triple eye guarded bull moose. And at the time we had a lot of moose, and we found a lot of sheds. I was kind of, like I said, in our high school years, we were picking up tons of moose paddles in the wintertime. And I mean, one day, one of the best days I ever remember, Travis, I don't even remember why Travis ended up getting a head start, but I had to meet him up in the mountain. And by the time I met him up in the mountain, he had like 14 or 16 fresh paddles in the back of his pickup. And then I was like, oh, I'll zigzag up here above the road, and I go zigzag above the road and pick up 11. And I was like, that's how it used to be. You know, I mean, obviously that was a really good day, but it was very common for us to pick up 5 to 6 paddles a day. We went out looking for sheds, freshies. And then elk, we would glass them up in the spring, find their elevation, and pick up their sheds too. So, but yeah, the wolves have made it a little more challenging for us. But as hunters, you know, you have to be really adaptable. And I'm still, you know, if I still look at my record, I'm still, you know, people are like, well, you're just blaming the wolves for not having success. I'm like, well, the success, I'm not bragging, but the success is still there. We're still killing elk every day off the mountain, but I still care about our wildlife numbers, right? Yeah. I'm still like, you know, you go in an area and even like you'll look at a burn, like let's talk about the Selway, for example. You go, there's thousands and thousands of acres of burn.
Yep.
And you hike and glass, and you go 4 or 5 days, even a week without seeing an elk. And it's like,
yeah, no, I actually hunted the Selway a lot.
I don't consider that balance.
Yeah. You know, because of the places I used to hunt, you know, before I came to Cody here, you know, if I drew a tag in Wyoming, I come to Wyoming. And if I didn't draw a tag in Wyoming, then we go to the Selway, you know, just outside of Elk City on the over the counter tag, you know, and that was actually a rifle hunt during the rut. You know, that season used to open September 15th, and it used to amaze me how hard it was to find elk in that unit. You know, I mean, you got a lot of burn area. You also got just probably more blowdown than I've ever seen anywhere in my life in that unit. It's so hard to get around in there. It's just such tough country. But yeah,
it is.
You know, and I had never gotten to hunt it before the wolves were there, you know, so I couldn't see the difference, but there was definitely plenty of wolves when we were hunting it.
Right. And for me, I didn't either, but my dad did. So my dad, he hunted the Locksaw before the wolves. He hunted the Selway, and he said before the wolves and the Selway, what you'd see, there's a lot of outfitters in there. And he said for miles, you'd see these pack strings of just an elk on every mule and horse.
Yeah.
And just monster bulls would be pulled out. And he said it was just insane. And there was just, you know, the elk would just wake you up at night just screaming. You know, he always talked about
so
that.
Cool.
Even when I was a kid, I wouldn't say I was a baby. I could have been like 3 or 4 years old or something. I still get made fun of to this day that, you know, I get scared because of the elk bugling. Like he brought he brought my mom. I don't even remember if even my sister was born yet, but it was Travis, me, my mom and dad would be at the camper, and the bulls would be screaming out in the camper, and I'd just be screaming all night, just scared to death that there's a monster out in the woods, you know. And it was these elk that would keep us awake at night. And it's like, you know, he's like, I'm so surprised you turned out the hunter that you were. I didn't think you were going to get into hunting, you know. Now you're crying at elk bugles, and
yeah, that's funny.
But he said that, the elk hunt was just unreal back in the day, and it's the same story. You hear anybody else will tell you the same story.
Oh yeah, you know, I guess the obvious question then is, you know, I mean, you made that transition, you know, from hunting elk when they were plentiful, and then hunting now that it's a lot more challenging, and you still kept that same basic success ratio, you know. So really like to get into, like, you know, tips and tactics and techniques and stuff that have been working for you, especially, you know, because this is the reality for people hunting in the West now, is there's definitely wolves, you know. So how do you still do it?
Well, a lot more work, a little bit more miles. But I'd say the most important thing that came into play is actually learning the behavior, not just elk, but big bulls. For me, and, you know, my dad always taught us, you know, any bull's a good bull. But I feel like at my point in my life, like, I don't get excited when I kill a spike or a rag bull. Mm-hmm. Now I still consider myself a meat hunter in the sense I still got to fill the freezer every single year, no matter what. But for me, if I have an elk tag in my pocket, I want that to be the biggest, oldest bull in the mountain. And so that's what I always go after. And, you know, growing up in, you know, I was telling you about in my high school time, at that time, it was just like whatever opportunity presented itself, right? So if a big bull would come in, we'd kill it. If it was a rag bull that came in, we'd kill it. Travis had a little bit more luck than I did. So like I've always felt like if my dad called in elk for my brother, he always ended up with the big bulls. Then if I was set up and Dad called elk in, it was always a rag bull. So, but Travis, he had a 6-point streak for years where he was just, killing big bull after big bull. And he killed a 360 bull when he was like 16 years old. And in our country, that's just super rare. Like they just don't grow like that.
Yeah.
Where we live, like 340 max usually.
Okay.
And so we get short main beams. We don't have like, it's the heavy. So just to kind of paint a picture, it's the heavy brushy country, not really any openings unless it's logged, or burned. And so our elk, they don't get the big main beams. But what they will do is they'll gain mass and they'll gain large fronts, and they'll even sometimes stag out, kind of like a red stag, where they'll start getting flyers off the sides and get those cool 7 points, but we don't get those big, huge 50-inch main beam clean sixes, that I would see. Like what we actually hunted Wyoming this year with Trevor. He drew a tag, and we were seeing a lot of those just giant bulls that just had 55, 60-inch main beams. And it was a fun hunt, but it was fun to hunt different terrain. I like to do that every so often, but I guess getting back to it. So for me, it was just like you just hunt, and if one elk didn't work out, another opportunity would eventually present itself. Just put in your time and kill an elk. And now that the wolves have moved in the area, it's like, okay, what's changed? Well, the elk have changed a lot of their habits around. And for me, wanting to be a selective elk hunter, I've had to learn not just about how elk behave, but how big bulls behave.
Okay.
Because, you think of a bull elk that hits that age class of 6, 7 years old, even 8 years old. And he's had to outsmart public land hunters.
Yep.
And he's had to outsmart predation.
Yeah.
And he's also had to figure out how to survive, because we do get harsh winters. It's been pretty mild the past 6 years, but for the most part, if you get a harsh winter, these big bulls know where to put themselves at, and where you see these rag bulls and cow elk hang out, that's not where you see those big bulls, at least if it's not the rut. September's a whole different ball game where, big bull's a big bull, but he's got to breed his cows, right? So you'll see him just show up out of the blue breeding these cows. Like, where the heck did you come from? What hole did you crawl out of? Yeah. And then all of a sudden after the rut's over, he just disappears again. And I think for me, hunting that timber country, I was like, there's something about hunting the mystery of the mountain, but knowing it's like, I don't want this to be a mystery for me anymore. I actually want to know where these guys go.
Okay.
We see them during the rut.
Yeah.
But it seems like when the rut's over, they just vanish.
Yeah.
And where do they go?
So you predominantly
find the. Oh, what were you saying?
I'm sorry. So are you predominantly hunting like kind of like the later season after the rut, or you kind of equal opportunity? Will you hunt the archery season and then roll right into the rifle?
Yeah, I'll hunt the archery too. And so it's actually I'm an opportunist. Whatever works out. If I was to look at my antler pile, say the bigger bulls I've killed have been during the archery season.
Okay.
Just because, and it has nothing. Well, obviously the equipment helps, right?
Yeah.
I feel like my odds of killing a big bull are higher with the long range rifle, but if those elk aren't visible to see, then makes that kind of tough. But yeah, so I typically lean toward the archery in a lot of ways, but I've also killed some dandy bulls. I mean, the bull I killed last fall was a post rifle.
Nice.
With a gunworks rifle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I aged him at 8. He was 8 years old bull. So
now, were you glassing them up in the berm, or are you just like low crawling through the timber? Because in my mind, I haven't been in the Selway, and they had a rifle season during the rut. That was hard to hunt during the rut. Trying to hunt that post rut in my mind has got to be so difficult because it is so thick. Once they're not bugling.
Yeah. So I'll give you kind of a story of the bull I killed last year. So I did glass him up during the archery season. And then, so I hunted him for the early part of the archery season. I saw him, he had the herd of cows, and I set trail cameras in there. And he was in there the whole time. The unfortunate thing is I was telling you, we went to Wyoming, so I had to leave him be like, okay, I guess I got to go Wyoming. But it was a fun hunt. I'm glad we did that Wyoming hunt. And then after that, Travis and I went to Colorado, and Travis filled his tag, and I sat there in Colorado, and I was telling you how I've been a little bit more selective. There was a lot of elk.
Okay.
A lot of elk in that unit in Colorado, but I just wasn't seeing the quality. And I got to this weird point where in the hunt where I'm like, Travis, I think I would rather go and find that big bull again and try to pursue him than chase around these average 5 points and very small 6 points, in Colorado. Although we were having a lot of fun and seeing a lot of elk, I'm just like, I feel like the quality was better at home. And so I decided to go back toward the very end of the archery season to look up that bull again. And long story short, I was like, I got eyes on that bull again. And so this is where I kind of, this was my procedure with this bull, is there is openings in this area, and there's also thick, heavy timber and alders. Alders is that 12-foot tall brush. What I have found with this bull is if I bump him out of the openings, he goes to the alders and the heavy timber. So the way I approach this bull every time is I would actually start my hunt in the heavy alders and heavy timber, and then he would move to the openings. And so that is how I approached this bull. And I saw that he kept doing that to where I was like, well, rifle season is going to kick in a couple weeks. I'm convinced I can get a long range shot on this bull. And so I checked my trail cameras, and he was, and right at tree line, he's been on my trail camera because after getting back from Wyoming and Colorado, I was gone for a couple weeks. I had like 40 photos of this bull elk going in and out of this wallow with his cows, the same bull.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's living here.
Yeah.
He's not like, he's here. And so I'm like, I think I can kill him with the rifle if I play my cards right. And so I decided to back, which is kind of hard for me, but I'm like, I'll back out and I'll just pursue this bull with the rifle. Cross my fingers that this bull is still in the area.
Yeah.
And so if you get an early snow, I could be screwed, right? Like they'll pull out of the country and start heading to their wintering range. And then he's really in the nasty brush for a while. But as long as he's still kind of using that above tree line stuff, I think I can get a shot off him. So rifle season came. I went in there. I approached it as I always do. I go through that thick, heavy timber. I threw a beagle. I got one beagle, and he started to do his typical run like the runner he is. And then I got out, and then I cut tracks. I see a bunch of cow elk tracks moving up the hillside. I follow those tracks up the hillside thinking that the bull was with the cows. And then there was this big draw, just trying to paint the picture. There's this big draw. And on the other side, that's when you start getting above tree line where I typically see them. But I was like, well, I'm following the cow tracks because he's probably with the cows. And it was downpouring rain, so you could see where they're sliding in the mud. And all of a sudden I hear a bugle in the wrong direction, and it was across the canyon. I'm like, that's got to be him. And the reason why I was saying it's got to be him and not another bull is there really wasn't another bull living in that area. Like the whole time I had trail camera photos, there was only one bull in there. And I'm like, that's got to be him.
Yeah.
So I actually stopped following the cow elk tracks, and I found a big granite boulder where I can see that hillside. And it's still kind of a tough hillside to glass because there was a whole bunch of brushy spots, timber sections, and it was downpouring, it was fogged in. I'm like, well, I gotta wait this out. And so I had to build a fire. I threw on my QU, the Yukon gear, and it was cold a torrential downpour, just like Kodiak Island status. And so I was sitting there for 4 hours like that, and I'm like, I know he's out there. And as soon as the fog, I got a little lift in the fog, and I saw him, like, I got my binos. I'm like, oh, that's him.
That's
him.
And
then the fog went back. It went across the hillside again. I couldn't see him anymore. But it's like,
I know he's there.
I know he's there now. So I waited for the fog to lift again, and I got another break. And the wind was, or the rain was just downpouring rain. It's just like I said, it's a torrential downpour that never let up. And there he was just browsing, and it was almost like although he bugled, it seemed like he was started getting in that post rut phase. Like he was by himself. over there in the brush field, and he was just feeding like he hasn't ate a meal in a very long time.
Yeah.
He's just eating. So, and then he'd like disappear in a thick brush patch, and I saw him pop back out. Well, I ranged. I'm like, holy smokes, he's only 400 yards away. So I got on a granite boulder, got the camera set up. I'm solo, so then I ended up putting a, like a hat with a cap like this over the camera so it wouldn't get wet.
Yeah. And
just set everything up, push play, and he stood broadside for me, and I gave him one with the 7 Psalm, and went in the timber right there and tipped over dead. So I went over there, got 2 front quarters out that night. The whole day was a 12-mile hike, but just hiking straight line back to the pickup, it was about 5 miles straight back. And so I was just like, I'll get the 2 fronts out, and then maybe I can get some help the next day. And so I got Travis and my little brother Trevor out there the next day, and they helped us pack out the rest. Yeah. And then going back to Trevor's Wyoming, Trevor killed a beautiful bull in Wyoming, the one that he wants to get mounted, but he didn't like the cape. And I was like, well, we'll get you a big black timber cape back at home, Trevor, and I saw the bull, like I saw the cape. I'm like, oh, I know Trevor's going to want to pack that cape out for his bull he killed. So he had probably the heavier pack than I did on the way out, just because he wanted the cape for his Wyoming bull he killed, So we utilized a lot of that elk, all the meat and then even the hide too. And so, I like to get them aged. I don't know about you, but I got that. You could take out that bottom tooth out.
Okay.
And I just like to send them to Matson Labs. I've been doing that for the past 5 years now.
Okay.
And it's just, for me, our family's killed a lot of elk that are just like, man, that looks like an old elk. And you sit there and you just question the age and you have no clue. And I just got tired of doing that. I'm like, I actually want to know. Yeah. And so, I sent the tooth in on that bull, and he was 8 years old. And it just still, blows my mind that this bull is 8 years old. He's survived not just wolves, but that is a very highly concentrated area of grizzlies. Lots of grizzlies. On my trail camera, that wallow, there was a big boar grizzly that would use that wallow too, to just, on a warm day, he just lay in it. Yeah. And they chase elk all day. I mean, they're elk killers too. There's mountain lions, it's a general attack for residents. So, there's just so much for that elk to have to go through, for archery and rifle. So it's just like, you have to hunt those big bulls differently. Yeah. And so for me personally, kind of going back to it, on this 8-year-old bull, he's had a lot of years of experience, and you have to hunt him differently than these other elk. And it's almost like every bull has his own way of survival. They figure it out. And a lot of it has to do with the terrain, the weather, and the predation, and just the way people hunt it too. And so that's kind of how I go into hunting those big timber bulls. Yeah, you just but other ways too, where sometimes you're just stuck with the timber, then you're stuck to timber pounding, which is still I've killed my fair share of those too. So, yeah, you're just kind of low crawling, still hunting through the timber. Yes. Yeah. And so just over time, at least in our area, I wouldn't even say this area, because I actually timber pounded. The only Wyoming hunt I ever did, I ended up timber pounding. Did you? Yeah. So just because I'm so used to it, I drew a Wyoming tag. This was, maybe 6 years ago, and we went to Wyoming. After 3 days of hunting, all the animals timbered up because of all the hunting pressure. There was blaze orange best as far as the eye can see. And we stopped seeing elk using the openings. We go at first light and would not glass a single elk. And Travis and I both look at each other. It's like, well, let's go back to our old method of timber pounding. And, and that type of terrain in Wyoming, it was about 50-50. It was like 50% timber, 50% openings. But timber's thick, like you can't blast through that timber, so you have to get in there. And we got in there, and we were bumping elk left to right. Yeah, and now, so you cow call your way through there? Do you cow call your way through there, or you just slow crawl? So low crawl, I always keep an elk reed in my mouth.
Okay.
Because what I'll do is I'll walk really slow. You take a couple steps and you glass. And sometimes I won't really get into it too much unless I'm actually seeing and smelling elk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you can waste a lot of time still hunting if you're not an elk. I mean, there's miles of country where there's no elk. But it's like, okay, so as soon as you're like walking, all of a sudden like, okay, well, there's a fresh track. Okay, well, there's some fresh dung. So maybe there's an elk bedded in here. That's when you start putting on the brakes, start moving a little bit slower, and I'll keep an elk reed in my mouth. And the goal is you want to spot the elk before it spots you. Yeah. If the elk takes off running before you have a chance to look at it, you're moving too fast. That's what I've always said.
Okay.
So you know, you're walking, you just glass, you pick apart the timber. You expect to see a big yellow body, and that's not what you always see. Sometimes what you're seeing, you're just like, you'll look in the timber with your binos, and all of a sudden you see an eyeball or you see an ear. Yeah. Or even, you know, or you just see a rack. You're like, wait, are those tine? Is that a tine? And sure enough, all of a sudden it stands up. You're like, oh, that's a bull, you know? Yeah. And so you want to spot the elk before it spots you. And obviously, you know, you can't outsmart an elk's nose. So you have to always watch your wind. Yep. You know, utilize the wind, keep it in your favor. I've also I've said this a couple of times, and it sounds weird, but I followed my nose on elk. Where there was a time I was timber pounding, and I hit a bench where I got this whiff of elk, and I just checked the wind, and it was blowing this way. I'm like, let's just follow the wind. And there was the bull bedded right there, you know? Oh, wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I followed my nose before it led me to an elk. But going back to that Wyoming hunt, it ended up being kind of a rush shot, but it was a cool hunt it was a cool video because I shot the bull on the run. You know, I bumped him, and he was at the Boucher group. And I thought I saw all the elk, but they were all scrambled together. And then all of a sudden I saw a big long front. So I'm like, that looks good. And I ran after him, and I stopped, and then he just ran in the timber about maybe 75 yards, just like this. And it's a pretty cool video on our YouTube channel. I let him really quick shot, and he just tipped over, just, you know, what I like about it is it's hard to capture those hunts on video. It's like, you get those really cool experiences. Like, oh, I wish that was on video. It's so cool. No one would believe I made that shot. And then it's on video. So glad Travis was there and had the camera ready. So long story short, you know, sometimes you have to utilize that timber pounding technique to make it work. You know, and people are like, well, why do you always carry a long range gun? I'm like, well, because sometimes you have to. Sometimes, like, you know, it's like that bull I killed this year. You know, he has 400 yards. Yeah. And you know, and I'd say that 80% of that area, your shots are going to be 70 to 80 yards. Yeah. But man, if I get into a opening above tree line, or if I get in a burn, or even maybe a big block of like a clear cut, a logging cut they have, and you have a bull at 800 yards it's like, oh, he's going to get away. I better make the shot now. Mm-hmm. You know, I have no time to get up there to make the stock. It's like, well, I got a Gunworks gun. Let's get him, you know? Yeah, I was thinking about it. I was thinking about it when you mentioned the 7 Psalm, you know, and all the timber pounding you do. Are you shooting a Magnus or a Climber? Climb. Yeah, I was kind of thinking that, you know, most people would think that is like your sheep rifle, you know, but I view that rifle as just being that, like, kind of the jack of all trades rifle, you know, because the shape of that stock makes it very comfortable to hand carry for me, you know, and you spend, you know, if you're going to be working timber like that, you know, you got to be ready. So, you know, it's not strapped to your backpack, you're hand carrying it, you know, ready for what happens, you know, so, pretty interesting. Cause like I think if people have the ability to shoot 600 yards, that gives you the ability to shoot cross canyon in so many places, and it completely changes the way you can hunt if you don't have to get over on the same slope as the animal. Exactly. Yeah. So it's always nice for them to not sense your presence, you know, at any chance possible. And so, but yeah, no, like I said, I enjoy hunting elk. And, you know, actually when I look at the past couple of years and the bulls that I've killed, some of the biggest bulls that I've killed have actually been since we've had wolves, you know? And so, so it's just a lot of it came to it, just like knowing how these big bulls behave versus just having a lot of elk. Right. Yeah. Like, so I can't necessarily use it as an excuse, but it's like, but I do know for the fact, I'm like, for what I know now, I wish I could go back in the day when it was good, when we had 340, 360 bulls running around, you know. It's like, I just like know so much more now. And it's like, oh, I wish I did. Cause sometimes I will say this, that being a hard hunter is not enough. Sometimes, you know, in an area where there's very little game, because like you can hike miles and miles. I have friends that they're just as good shape as I am, and they put in the miles and they can't find an elk.
Yeah. And they're putting the miles in the wrong spot.
Yeah. And that's what they're doing. They're putting miles in the wrong area. And there's a lot of dead country when you're hunting wolves. Like we talked about the Selway, like we packed in, we were 26 miles in, we packed in with our horses and meals. And then there was an additional 6 to where, you know, and it was a full week.
Yeah.
To where we finally saw a herd of elk. Yeah. And there was a 6 point out there, and you're like, well, that is the only that we've seen this whole trip. So we got to go over there and kill that thing. Right. So it's a whole day getting over there. And it was that, like you said, it was that September rifle tag. We got over there in range. I don't remember what that might've been 500 yards.
Yeah.
And Travis shot that bull. So, but yeah, it's a different hunting. But one thing I say though is, you know, it doesn't matter where you're hunting. Elk are all the same species, but it's just the terrain and the predation and the hunting pressure is what really determines where elk go and how elk behave, you know? Yeah. So,
you know, and that's what always really appealed to me about, you know, kind of like that, you know, do it yourself, blue collar elk hunting, you know, cause I think there's so many guys that they sit at home and they put in for this primo elk tag, you know, but if they haven't been hunting elk every year leading up to it and owning their skills and getting better at it, you know, when they finally draw that really good tag, they've really got one of two choices. You know, they can hire a guide, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, you know, and that'll increase their odds. But if they go out there on their own and they haven't been putting in the time learning it, their chances of being successful, even though they've got this primo Nevada or Arizona tag, aren't necessarily that good. You know,
exactly.
And I think, you know, it's that training and that knowledge. I mean, anytime I can elk hunt, I just view it as like, hey, this is like training. This is training. And one of these days I'm going to find a big one. I'm still looking, you know?
Exactly. And like you said too, there's nothing wrong with having a guide in any way. But one thing with me or with our family is just like, you know, it's brought to our attention with some, like there's people that have had really good experiences with guides. Some guys don't, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to hunt Canada, you're required to have a guide, period. Or if you're hunting Alaska and you hunt certain species. The one thing that for me, I'm just like, I don't like to depend on my success on somebody else.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah, it's just like, I want to blame myself if it goes bad. Nobody else.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for me, I'm like, if I don't get an elk, it is my fault.
Completely my fault.
It's my fault.
Yeah.
I have no one else to blame in this situation.
Yeah.
So, and we work really good as our family. We've hunted so long together. You know, like I said, I hunt elk solo sometimes. Sometimes I love that feeling of the one-on-one with an elk. And sometimes it's just almost like a bonding moment with our family. You know, actually one of the biggest bulls I killed was with Travis, and it was a tag team effort. Actually, two of the biggest bulls I killed was a tag team effort with Travis. And it was like such a bonding moment for me, and my brother, and us tag teaming and me killing that bull. Right. And the one thing our family has always said to people, because some people are like, oh, are you competing with your brother and you see you can kill the biggest? I'm like, honestly, like if Travis kills the big bull, it almost feels like I killed it too.
Yeah.
Like it's like, cause like I said, like those two big bulls I killed, it's like Travis owns that elk as much as I do, because he helped me with strategizing that kill. You know, either he was glassing for me or he was pushing the elk. You know, that I had a bull 7x7. This was an archery tag, and there was a bull elk, probably the hardest elk I ever hunted him for 2 years.
Okay.
And he was a runner, and, you know, I've killed runners. I've called them in. There's certain techniques to that with archery, but this is a bull that it's a popular place people hunt. And this bull just knew how to avoid people. And his way of avoiding people is he would just run at every elk call that he didn't recognize. You could let out a small, simple cow call and he'd run from you.
Yeah.
You could let out a bugle, he'd run from you. There was nothing that can do. I've tried every technique in the book. And so I've tried to just sneak in on him. And, and I've had close calls, but never was able to seal the deal, at least that first year, 2018 and 2019. My brother, Travis, and I thank him for this. He's like, all right, I'm going to help you tag team this bull, Tom. He's like, it's like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what you normally do, which is trying to call the elk. What you're going to do is you're going to get ahead of his escape route.
I love it.
Let's try it. Why not?
That's awesome.
We tried everything else in the book, right? And he's this beautiful 7x7. Like I said, he had the flyer genetics there. So he had a big sticker on both sides. And he even digressed a little the year that I ended up killing him versus the prior year. Well, anyway, so I get up on the hillside in the dark, just so that when the sun rose, I was in position. And Travis started to call this bull, and, he started to round up his cows and move up the mountain just like he normally does. And I just got ahead of the bugles, and I'm like, well, there's a bunch of these cliffs, but there's these chutes that they take up, and there's only 3 chutes that they could possibly go up. So I was kind of bouncing between the 3, and I'm like, had a hard time, hearing the echoes of the bugle, and it was foggy that day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know if I'm positioned right. And I'm like, I'll just sit here for a while. And I sat there. I was eating a Cliff Bar, and all of a sudden, it was 2 hours went by, and I just thought, he must have taken a different route. What in the world? It must have messed my chance. So I've set my bow down, I'm eating a Cliff Bar. 15 yards away, bunch of cows start single filing past me. I'm just like, you have got to be kidding me. And they're kind of like, they came up at 55 yards, and then they came at 15, like that. The trail went like this, and I didn't realize it. I didn't see the trail at the time. I'm like, oh, she didn't realize the trail did that big turn and come right to me and then cut back up the hill. So they go from 50 to 15 and then wraps up the hill. So I have cows at 15 yards, and then he popped up at 55. And I'm like, ooh, this is bad. And I have the bow laying on the ground, and I'm like, yeah, with that bow. I had the elk reed. I quickly put an elk reed in my mouth. And so as I grabbed the bow, I could see the cows were starting to like, what's that in the brush? And they're all looking toward me. And I just kept a cow call in my mouth. I just said some really soft cow chirps, got my bow ready. And as the cows busted, I yanked my bow back and just went, ew, ew, ew. And there was cows that ran up the hill, cows that ran down the hill, and that big bull just froze. He's just like, just like, oh shoot, he finally got me. And I got him with the arrow, and he just ran down those cliffs and just piled.
It's almost
80. It was like 80 something yards, and
it's almost like he realized. It's almost like he realizes, like, oh man, this worked so many times. They finally figured it out.
Yeah, he's like, oh shoot, I finally messed up.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that all my elk are aged at 8 years old, but he also aged at 8 years old.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome.
But my biggest bull I ever killed, it was aged at 6. And so you just never know what that age. But like, if I was to look back between 2019 and that bull, and then the bulls that then the bull I killed last year. So the past 5 years, I got 2 8-year-olds, a 6-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And then a young 6x5. And I never aged that one just because he was so young. I'm like,
yeah, he's young.
Yeah, I know he's young. He's probably 3,
Yeah.
And when I boiled his jaw, his baby teeth popped out. So I was like, okay, yeah. He's a younger one. And so, but now the other ones, I actually pulled out some pretty good quality the past 5 years. But it's cool. It's just like, like I said, like every bull he's figured out his own techniques of survival. And you even see it where they winter. They don't winter with the other elk. Even some of the bachelor groups, I'll see bachelor groups of average bulls, but then you'll see this big bull by himself.
Yeah. The biggest bull I've ever seen here in Wyoming was completely like that. It was a late season mule deer, and there was some little bachelor herds around, and then this big bull was just completely by himself. And he'd pop out of the timber and feed a little bit. And I was like, oh man, the biggest elk of my life in my mule deer unit. And I always see big mule deer in my elk unit. That's my luck.
Typical, right?
Yeah. But yeah, so talking about, kind of how folks can, kind of start gaining some of that knowledge, let's talk about elk camp a little bit.
Yeah. So we do have an elk camp coming up this summer. It is July 18th to the 25th. I'm not really giving it too fancy of a name. It's just Stuck in Rut Elk Camp. Come join us. Yeah. Last year we had the Gunworks crew come out and train long range shooting. We had archery shooting as well. There's a fun archery course that my friend puts out every year. And so and it's actually right next door. So we just do that and, we integrate it with the camp. And then just a lot of other techniques and how to hunt elk. One of the most fun things about this hunt is we actually do get to hunt an elk, and it is on a ranch.
Okay.
That's the only place you can actually hunt an elk in the middle of the summer.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's more of just getting the experience of just getting an elk on the ground, following a blood trail, and then deboning the elk, feeling what it's like to have it on your pack. There's just so, when I talk to a lot of people, and it's like, like I said, I have friends, I have peers that reach out to me. They're like, well, man, I struggle with killing elk. And so as I have these conversations with them, okay, like, what's your struggles? What are you having issues with? And I feel like a lot of it, for one thing I've noticed is it's having the confidence of being by themselves and killing an elk by themselves up in the mountains. Because when you kill an elk, it's a big animal, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you're like,
a lot of work.
This thing up by myself. And I've had my fair share of moments where I've been by myself. I've been on a trip by myself, and I'm like, I have no one to call.
And you're like, what have I done?
Yeah, what have I done?
What have I done?
I'm packing out an elk by myself. But I'm just like, well, just hang out the quarters, get the elk quarters where they're cool, where they'll stay cool, put them in a draw. In warmer country, I try to get them on a north-facing side.
Okay.
Get them hot. So cool and dry is where you want quarters. And I just start funneling them out, and the thing is, you're not required. It depends on which state, right? But there's like in Idaho, you're not required to pack out rib meat. Yeah. So you don't have to pack out the rib meat, which doesn't really add up a lot of weight anyways. But the thing is, you're not required to pack out guts and bones. So why are you packing that out?
Yeah. Debone them.
Yeah. Debone them. And it's funny to think back, because in the day, like when I was a teenager, all these guys like my dad and all these old timers all had a saw, and they would just saw straight down the back, and they literally would quarter an elk. Just saw, and everybody got a quarter, and they were heavy packs. And
now were you packing them that way or just putting them on horses?
That's how you're packing them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I grew up moose.
On big pack boards, and you just walk off the mountain. That was the era. And I don't know if anybody else was, because I never heard of deboning until I was in my later teens. I was about 18 years old, and my brother picked up the technique on a hunt that he did. And all of a sudden, I'm just like, I'm starting to go up the guts. Skinny's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm getting the guts out. I was like, we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
He's like, let me show you.
Yeah.
Debone it, and the only part where you have to kind of poke through, is back here to get those tenderloins. You have to poke in the back there. For me, I still sometimes like to kind of get the guts out just to get those tenderloins. But Travis, he's pretty good at, going in there.
Yeah, I can go behind that last rib and get the tenderloins out pretty good.
Yeah, so Travis pretty good at that too. For me, I'm like, sometimes I just like to get the guts out of the way, and well, also I still like, if I have time and I'm like, okay, I want to dissect the shot.
Yeah, I like to see what happened sometimes.
Yeah, I want to see what happened, and then I also want to see what they're eating. Okay. So I do that a lot with mule deer. So I'm like, it's going to stink, but I want to know what is. And especially where we live, there's a lot of different vegetation, and so it's like, what are these deer eating? And so I learned a lot just by ripping the guts open. Oh, okay, that's what he's after, and so you learn a lot like that by dissecting an elk or a mule deer. And so, there's pros to that too, but for packing out, deboning that thing, you're not required to pack all that extra nonsense out. There's no reason for it. Yeah. Or the guys that feel like they have a whole party, they're all pulling the rack, and they rip the guts out and they're pulling the rack. It's like, what are you guys doing? Yeah. And they drag it for a mile, and you're just like,
treating it like a whitetail.
Yeah, they're treating it like a whitetail. They're like,
yeah.
I got this pulley system and I hake
Yeah.
it to a tree. And you're like,
Dude.
just debone it and get it
Yeah.
out the mouth.
Yeah. And it's
But
actually
yeah,
it's kind of
oh,
surprising how small an elk really breaks down if you're used to packing quarters, how small
is.
it really breaks down when you actually debone one. Because
It does.
the first time I did it, a couple guys had a couple cows down, and I went out to help them pack, and they'd shot them right at last light, and they didn't pack anything out. And I was like, oh, okay, let's see. They both came out last night, so they probably at least got a quarter or two out. So okay, for three of us. No, it was three of us and 2 cow elk. And
Oh my God.
deboned. It was heavy, but we did it. And it was but there's no way we would have done that if we didn't debone them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, and usually if I have to go out the first trip and then get people, it's like, get out as much as I can now so it makes the other trip easier.
Yeah.
Because I have to hike back in there anyways. And so like my elk this year, I was like, okay, what could I pack out being solo? I'm like, if I do 2 fronts and then and then with neck and back straps and then the rears, and split it up amongst, me and both my brothers on the trip the next day, that's going to save us a lot of time and weight. And so I took, and 2 fronts are pretty light,
Yeah. They're not bad.
So I packed out the 2 fronts just that night, and pretty exhausted that day too, as always. You're a long day, and don't be afraid to walk in the dark either. I've had that, but that's something you can't really train. That's just something people have to get comfortable with, is walking in the dark.
You just kind of got to
watching scary movies. Come on.
And you just kind of got to get used to it, and it's kind of interesting because this kind of my philosophy is, we live in grizzly bear country here, but if I'm hiking at night with a headlamp on, I see eyes 100 yards away. Any deer you pass or anything you pass, you see the eyes 100 yards away. That's an animal that you wouldn't have seen. And then if I look at it from the perspective of, I'm carrying a pistol with a gun light on it, if I was to see some bear eyes, you hit it with that bright light, that bear has probably never encountered that in his life before, so it's got to completely throw him off his game. So maybe this is just me fooling myself and convincing myself I'm better off, but I've almost convinced myself that I'm probably better off walking around in the dark with a headlamp in grizzly country than I am walking around in daytime where they blend in and you can't really see them.
Yeah. With me, it's kind of, I think I've gotten accustomed to it, but here's the thing. I'm the only person in my family that hasn't been charged by a bear yet. So I think maybe I am just a little naive, but we have grizzlies too, where we live. And some of the places that I'm hunting, you're pushing alders like this. And so it's like it's going to be like this, where I go open the alders up. It's going to be right there. There's a grizz. So I'm like, but like I said, I've been, for wolf hunting. I mean, I've prayer called around grizzlies. I've yet to have one come in. Yeah. One time I had a feeling not to do a predator call. I got into a wolf area, seen a lot of wolves. I'm like, I should do a predator call here. And I'm like, this is a pretty high density of grizzlies. I was like, maybe I shouldn't. And as I was thinking that, at 70 yards, a sound 2 cub walked out, feeding in a grassy meadow. I'm like, good thing I didn't run that predator.
Good intuition there. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I had a feeling not to. And I was like, okay, maybe a good thing. So I've yet to have that. I've had black bears come into my predator calls. And let's see, I've had a mountain lion. Mountain lion ambush me too. I've actually archeried. Let's see, I've archeried just by accident. I've archeried wolves.
Okay.
Mountain lion.
Oh, that's awesome.
And a black bear over a cow elk call.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
And so, the wolves, I stuck 3 wolves. The pack came in. It was wild.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's just, I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't know if my predator or if my elk call sounds like a dying elk. I don't know what's going on, but I seem to keep calling predators with that thing.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so, like I said, I've had my fair share of experiences with predators, but I've yet to be charged where I I don't yet have a fear, but I probably should. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having some fear. Like I said, my sister, she's still, with her recent charge. Yeah. She's still, on edge. When I shot my brown bear last year, I was just like, make sure make sure you get this on video, because she was still on edge over her last experience with the brown bear. And she got a great video of the brown bear I killed this year.
Yeah. Very cool. I'll have to check that out. But
yeah, that was with the what was that? The Gunworks 338 rum.
Was it? Yeah.
That was Adams. Yeah, Adams built. What was he shooting? I don't remember what he was shooting out of there. He just had the load, and he's just like, use this gun for brown bear. I'm like, okay. So
yeah,
someone ended up killing it with, and yeah, good hunt. But I guess now getting back to elk again. So
I get distracted. I get distracted easily. Well, elk and grizzlies kind of go together anyway. So I actually think it's, because that's what it's kind of, that fear. And you kind of talked about it. People used to being alone out there, and how do I deal with this? And it's just kind of, I think if you, with the right kind of training, mindset, and equipment, based on my background, you can do stuff that most people would look at and say, wow, that's pretty dangerous, but you can do it with relative safety, and for the, for the people out there that are almost afraid to set foot in grizzly country, but yet you spend, like, how many days a year would you say you spend in grizzly country?
Well, I'm working in grizzly country. I'm logging right now, and I'm logging in grizzly country. Yeah.
So if you just kind of play the odds, if you're a little bit smart about it, I mean, you can spend hundreds of days in grizzly country and never had a bad experience, but yet I've run into hunters that have, been basically hightailing it back to the trailhead because they spotted one grizzly on the next ridge over, and they're like, I'm done, and I think it's just getting over that fear and getting comfortable out there.
I feel more uncomfortable walking through downtown Seattle than I do walking in grizzly country.
I'm with you there. Yeah. But anyway, so on the elk camp, how would somebody sign up for that?
Yeah, so we got it set up on our website now, so you can just go straight to stuckintheRut.com. And so the way it's spelled is stuck, and then rather than IN, it's with an N. So stuckintheRut.com. Just go there. You can sign up. We have a couple camps available. So that's where you can find our elk camp and sign up there. Or you can email me at sntrhunter@gmail.com. And it's just the abbreviation of Stuck in the Rut. So sntrhunter@gmail.com. Just send me an email if you have any questions, and feel free to get back to you on that. That's the email that I use quite a bit. So but yeah, I'd like to see everybody there. It's in July. So let's see, I got the dates right here. July 18th to the 25th. And we'll have Gunworks out there for 2 days straight is what we agreed on, right?
Yeah.
It's for what I have written down.
I can't remember. Was it 1 day as part of the elk camp, and then 2 days as like a possible add-on after that? Or was it 2 days as part of the elk camp? I can't remember.
So what we agreed. So yeah, so what I have as notes here right now. So we'll do, it's kind of at the very end of the camp, but we're going to do a shorter range tactical type shooting scenarios. We call
it like our position shooting class, like a field marksmanship clinic.
And then the next day is long range shooting.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that way you're kind of rounded in both ways, because like I said, I want to say most elk I shoot are close range, but because if I travel, I shoot a lot of elk long range too. But I mean, I don't really shoot elk at 200 yards. It's usually either 50 to 100 yards in the timber, or it's 400 beyond out in a wide open. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, every so often I'll get one at 200 yards, which is still a great shot. I don't have to dial anything. Yeah. Even at 300 yards, you really don't have to dial, at least with that 7th Psalm. It's by start reaching out past that, then you need to start looking at wind, start making some corrections, past that point. But it'll be a fun camp. And we had a great time last year. That's why we're doing it again. We're like, well, it was a success. Let's do it again. We have a couple spots left, so feel free. Anyone who's interested, reach out to me.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, and like I said, I mean, if you want to learn how to hunt elk, I mean, these guys have been hunting elk, kind of that do-it-yourself fashion for a long time. And I don't think I'll be out there, but Jeremy Winters, one of our other instructors, who's literally Gunworks employee number 1, has been with Gunworks since day one and has way more elk hunting experience than I have. He's going to be handling that. So, you'll have Jeremy out there again this year. So
that's great. I love Jeremy. I learned so much from him. Every time I think I know what I'm doing, and then have somebody like you or Jeremy start talking, I start joining the crowd with the notes, and I'm just like,
We don't. That's why we call Jeremy the Wizard. Yeah, that's his nickname, right?
The Wizard.
Yeah, we call him the Wizard around here because he's been here since day one. So no, awesome. Anything else that you want to hit that you think that we missed here? Or?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, and like I said, anything else that needs taught, it's better. I mean, I could talk about elk all day, but I feel like the best way for you to learn is to get you in a hands-on experience.
Yeah.
And so if you're really wanting to know elk and learn elk, and just remember this too, that this is an investment. Like you pay for this one time, you gain this knowledge, and this is years and years of experience, not just from us, for my dad and these other old timers that's been passed on for years. And we're cramming it in a 5-day camp for you guys, so that it's more like a little more than 5 days, pretty much a week.
Yeah.
But we're just cramming that information that, look, like you're saving years and years of money. I have friends that have told me they haven't killed an elk in 5 or even 10 years.
They've just been pounding mountains.
Exactly. Well, there's a statistic I should throw out too. So I was just looking this up the other day. I was like, because it's the time to start drawing for Idaho tag, right? Deer and elk right now. And so I was looking this up, and I just kind of got carried away and looking at, I'm like, what are the odds of me killing a 6-point bull elk where I live, right? And just kind of the country and central to North Idaho, what are the odds? And so I just picked a couple units and I checked, and most of the state, like from central to north, your odds in killing just an elk in general is like 7% odds.
Yeah.
But to kill a 6-point bull is 1% odds.
Wow.
And killing a 6-point bull. So you have to think that to yourself, because the one statistic I was looking at, and it's close to where I live, it was, there was 4,900 and some tags from archery, rifle, muzzleloader combined.
Yeah.
And then from there, it was like 447 hunters killed elk. Just elk, period. Cows, spikes,
wow,
rag bulls, everything. 57 were 6 points.
Yeah. Because, man, if someone can shorten their learning curve.
Yeah. So it's like, for me, it's like, I've been killing 6 points for a very long time.
Yeah.
And pretty much when I'd say about the time I got out of high school, that was the time I become a 6-point guy. Like, I'm like, if he doesn't have 6 points, I just can't get myself to pull the trigger unless it's a giant 5.
Yeah.
Which I haven't been tempted on that just yet. But, but I average a 6-point a year.
Yeah.
And in an area where my odds in killing a 6-point are 1%. And so for me, when I'm reaching out and tell people, I'm like, do you want to be 1%? I'm not trying to brag about, 1%, but I'm just saying that, look, I didn't know that I was the 1%. I just thought this is
how you hunt elk.
I hunted hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to kill my elk. But I didn't realize it was really that hard, and it is, but it's just, we have years of experience. So some things come second nature, other things I have to adapt, but let's break that learning curve for you.
Yeah. And I look at it as like, there's a lot of guys out there that are in pretty good shape that can get out there and pound the mountains, but there's very few shortcuts, to gain that experience. So you're hunting smartly and you're investing all that physical energy smartly, and attending something like that where you get that opportunity to learn. And if you can shorten that learning experience by years, that's a couple whole seasons that you don't just spend hiking the mountains, not seeing anything, so got to be extremely valuable in my opinion. In fact,
absolutely.
I need to take some vacation and just go myself. I'm sure it'd help me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, awesome, Tom. I think you got to get to work, don't you?
Pretty soon. I'm on my own time. So, but yeah, it would be, I got to start working eventually. So
yeah,
it'd be a good time to start.
Yeah. Cause that was my point, is that, you're just, you're kind of this, hunting personality, I guess I'd call it, for lack of a better term, but you have a real job. You're out there, you're working as a logger every day. And, so, I think that's just one of the things that helps people relate to you as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Hey, it was great talking to you, and thanks a lot. And thanks for joining us on the podcast, and join us next time.
If you like what you're hearing here, please take a second and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. We appreciate your feedback and suggestions for topics you'd like discussed or questions you want answered on the podcast. You can reach out on Facebook or Instagram or send us an email to podcast@gunworks.com. Also, be sure and check out our full offering of long-range gear at gunworks.com. Use promo code LRP for free shipping on any order.